Cindy, you have a question?
Hi, Carole. Thank you so much for this Q&A. And congratulations on your upcoming launch. I really look forward to reading the book. The question that I had is whether you had any challenges writing in your future setting, and if there were challenges, how you addressed those challenges.
Yeah, I really like that question. That is, my next book is also near future. I don't know why do I do that to myself, but the problem with it is trying to make sure that your book won't become immediately dated, you know, when it comes out, like that you had thought of technology as it would be when you, in the world that it's going to be read in, and it's not easy because like already I feel like the Mother Code is outdated. It's like movies that came out with the Twin Towers in them after 9/11. And you feel like, oh my gosh, I didn't mention anything about a pandemic that happened in 2020. Now it's like, it's in everybody's mind that it was in their past. So it's not easy, and then so reading a lot of futuristic books, well, you know, trying to figure out whether or not that their predictions are going to come true, whether or not the technology that you perceive will happen is actually going to happen. I mean, I have to hand it to people like Philip K. Dick and Ray Bradbury, that they came up with these technologies that now we hold in our hands. And for us, it was like, what? I'm amazed by people like that. It is one of the hardest parts. And so some of it is kind of avoidance. You know, don't go there if you don't think you know. But sometimes you got to dig in and really try to answer those questions. So I would say I did a lot of research for the book. A lot of it was travel, but a lot of it was Googling and watching and going to seminars about future technologies and reading up and all of that. And it's a constant trouble.
Well,
Another thing I'll say about sci-fi is you get a lot of criticism in sci-fi that, oh, this is just another rehash of X, Y, or Z, whatever. I think the moral that I've learned is there's nothing new under the sun. Everything is a rehash of something, like maybe the Bible even. I mean, so you just have to make it your story. You have to make it something that people want to read. And you know, because I just read a critique of one of my favorite shows is Westworld, its third season, and they said, well, it's just a rehash of Asimov's Foundation, and I'm like, well, okay, but I really like it, so is it okay for me to like it? So you end up with that kind of criticism.
Sarah, yeah.
Yeah, just building off what you just said about research, that's something that I found really challenging on my own projects, which is that you can kind of go down a rabbit hole in the research part. And I was wondering if there was a point where you were like, okay, I've done enough research, I'm going to write now. Or did you, as you were writing, keep going back to research? And how did you structure that, if you did at all?
Yeah, so I'm running into the same problem with the current book that I'm working on as I did with the Mother Code. Is now I would get to a plot point and I would think, okay, now how are they going to get themselves out of this? What is going to happen here? And I find myself doing a lot of research again. And I don't think, for me, it's unavoidable. Like I just keep, and it's not one of my favorite parts. My favorite part is when you're writing, when you're in the groove, things are working, and you're moving forward, and pages are coming out. But when you have to do that stop and no, let's read this, and then you find out that something you said is probably not right, and you need to go back and fix it. It's like annoying. I think one of the most annoying things happened to me when I was going through line edits, actually, and it was having to do with what would people eat in the desert. It was a silly thing like that, but it was an important thing. If you were the only person there and there was no canned tuna and things like that, what would you eat? And so I had posited some things that I thought they would eat, and this person said, that doesn't grow there. That's the wrong season. the weather is wrong for that. And I go, oh my gosh, no, I gotta have, yeah. So I gotta research all of that now on top of all this science and everything else. And it's grueling. It's probably my least, it's why I wished I wrote, magical realism or something else. But it's my least favorite part.
This is a really quick story just because I thought it was so funny. I actually had a beta reader because my novel's set in the Salish world, with the Suquamish. And I had the curator of the Suquamish Museum do a beta read for me. And she, at one point I had written that she had a hat that was made out of cedar bark. And this curator came back and said, oh, when you say that hat was made of cedar bark, we make them out of cedar bark now, but in those days it would have been made out of cedar root. And I thought, oh my God, that kind of level of detail. I actually really got a kick out of finding out all the things that I got wrong. Like my mom read for me as well. I had some Chinese cultural references, and she just said, Chef, she goes, you have 6 cups here with this teapot. I was like, yes. She said, we don't we do 5. I'm only a generation away. I didn't know that. So yeah, research to build that world is just so
yeah. There was some interesting feedback I got about New Orleans from my daughter's friend. She said, I would say things like y'all, and she goes, no, it's all y'all, like things like that, or oh, we would never say this, whatever you just said, we would never ever say that, and we say this weird thing. And I thought, are you sure that's going to go over with the general readership? And she goes, but it's right, you have to do it. So it had to do with forms of speech and the way people, certain things people say.
So Doug, you haven't asked a question, and I keep thinking that you must have one.
Yes, I do, and it has to do with plotting. I got the feeling that you don't do plotting.
Oh, go ahead.
Well, no, I'm a big time plotter, and anyway, I'm just curious about your methods.
So I just I had written something for Writer's Digest. It just came out. I'm not sure if it's going to be kind of widely available, but it's called Breaking In. So they featured me and some other authors, and I talked about this: the plotter versus the pantser.
Oh yeah.
And so I started out as just, oh my gosh, I just want to write. Just let me write. I want to write. So I didn't, as Shirin well knows probably, I didn't plot a whole lot, and things would. I do think you have to have a beginning and you have to have an end, right? But how you get there, right? So in this next time, I am taking a lot more care with laying out all the beats, right? Yep. My daughter, see, I think there's somebody in this group that knows my daughter from a screenwriter's class, but she learned, that you write out beats, and I like that idea, the beat sheet. What is the most important part? Where's the climax? Where is the denouement, et cetera, et cetera. I'm taking a lot more time with that now than I used to, but I still don't spend a whole lot of time with it. I had to do it for the Butterfly Garden, because the Butterfly Garden was something that was laid out in 10 segments of 10 pages each, one to be released each week, and you had to end each one on a kind of like a cliffhanger or what's going to happen next kind of thing. So I had to write very careful beats, and it kind of trained me to do that. And sometimes if I can think out 5 chapters ahead, I'll write out the beats for the next 5 chapters. But many times I find myself going off in a good way, going off that outline away from it, and having to change it. I'm trying to be more disciplined because I spent too much time writing stuff that wound up on the floor. And
there you go.
Yeah.
That's what I always find is if I don't plot it, then I end up going on those tangents.
Yeah. And it's just a matter of, was that a good tangent or not? And it's only time will tell. It's like, unfortunately. unfortunately. Yeah.
Thank you.
Hi, Barb. I see you, Barbara Ridley there.
Hi, Carol. I have to leave in a moment, but I'm just so excited for you, and it's so wonderful to hear everything you've been through. It's very encouraging.
Yeah, we'll have to do another Zoom on our own
Yeah.
and talk about our projects that we're working on now. Yeah.
Sorry, I kept muting myself so I could eat potato chips. Julie?
Yeah, I have a quick question that's sort of a how do you pick yourself back up kind of question. So you mentioned crying, that when the when the feedback comes and the tears have to come first because, you know, get that stress out. But how do you sort of regroup and get back to it and keep fueling when you aren't sure how many more rounds there's going to be?
Oh, wow. Yeah, that was hard.
Sorry.
Yeah, it's just really hard, and I think you have to expect it to be hard. And if you expect it to be hard, then you're not so disappointed by the whole thing. Because yeah, at the time I don't know, every time I would hear back, especially by the time I got to Heather, and every time I'd hear back, and there was always this kind of thing hanging over my head that she doesn't do more than 3 rounds, and if she doesn't like it on the 3rd round, she's not going to help you, and then it's it. And it's happened to some of my friends actually, with her, who are not happy. So it was really daunting. And I guess one thing I had was I had my daughter and I vented to her a lot. There were friends that I vented to a lot. Venting is good. It's like, how could she think that this and this and this and this when I said that and that and that? And sometimes that person will help you kind of see it through a different lens. Like, well, maybe she's thinking that blah, blah, blah. And also these people, like Heather, will offer extremely detailed notes, and you can read them. You read them the first time and you're just gobsmacked and you want to kill yourself. And then you read them the second time 2 days later, and it kind of is exact words are sinking in, and you're thinking, oh yeah, that's an easy fix. Or sometimes I would get back to her and say, I really don't understand what you mean, or if I fix this, it's going to make everything else fall apart. So there'd be a discussion back and forth. So her process was, and I think with Sharon too, it was you get the notes, you digest them, you cry a lot, then you kind of eventually will have another session with them where you can go over the more sticky points, the ones that are really causing a problem for you.
Okay.
Thank you.
I don't know if that helps.
One quick, just small question was whether you use Scrivener to write.
No, I didn't. I don't use anything like that. So I'm so old fashioned. I use Word and I use tons of comments in the margins, my own comments. So when if I have a reference that I looked up that relates to that thing, I'll actually put the link there, or I'll put, think about this later, or I'll put things like, this is to explain the blah, blah, blah. So this is important. So I kind of do, I think, what Scrivener is doing, but I kind of do it on my own with a whole lot of, you should see, I mean, when I write, it's just as marked up as anything. It's a mess.